We here at the Sports History Network proudly partner with 26 podcasts, all revolving around the history of sports. But did you know that many of our hosts were sports history authors way before they started their shows? It's true. We've got Joe Ziemba, host of When Football Was Football, Joe Zagurski, host of Pro Football in the 1970s, Mark Morthier, host of Yesterday Sports, Tommy Phillips, host of Lombardi Memories, and Scott Adamson, co-host of From the 55-Yard Line. All these authors have many books for you to choose from. To check them out, go to our website at sportshistorynetwork.com/sportshistorybooks. Pick up your copy today. Soundtrack provided by Kevin MacLeod of filmmusic.io.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello and welcome to the Sports History Network Showcase, our in-house show featuring SHN podcasters talking sports, talking history, and talking sports history. My name is Oz Davis, host of the Sports History Network's Truly the Goats podcast. And on this episode of the Showcase, joining me is Rick Loiza of this podcast, Basketball History 101. How are you doing this evening, Rick?
I'm doing really well, Oz. Thanks.
Okay, great. We got enough time to do this before the Laker game tips off, right?
Yeah, I believe we do.
All right. Well, like most of the folks here at Sports History Network, I mean, you've been a sports fan since you were a kid, in your case in the mid-'80s, according to your bio. But when did you first start getting into, let's say, sports history specifically?
Yeah, no, great question. Sports history came not that long after I started watching basketball, football, really getting into sports in general. So I'm at the public library and I'm looking through the sports books, and I come upon the book called Second Wind by Bill Russell. And I check it out from the public library. I read that thing, and of course, we all know Bill Russell played in the 50s and 60s. But reading that book really sparked something in me that I wanted to know where the game came from and what other stories were out there about basketball history.
Your bio page at the Sports History Network, it says, quote, one of his favorite things to do is go to a bookstore and buy every basketball book he can buy. Well, you told us about your first book. Let me ask you this. What are you reading lately? And what's a book that you can recommend to any sports fan?
Oh, sure. The book I'm reading right now is called Unfinished Business, written by Jack McCallum. A lot of you, if you watch the NBA or you read about the NBA today, Jack McCallum is he also wrote the book 7 Seconds or Less about the Steve Nash Phoenix Suns. So he wrote this book called Unfinished Business, which chronicles the 1990-91 Boston Celtics. And it really kind of goes through that period of time where Dennis Johnson had just retired. Bird was starting to really experience serious back issues. McHale was starting to lose a step. And I think Robert Parrish was already approaching 40 or something. He was already really old. So it kind of covers that part of Celtics history. And I'm almost finished with that. But if I had to say like one book that I would recommend to anybody who really likes basketball history, well, there's a couple of them, so I'll go through those real quick. One is called NBA at 50, and that book came out in 1996 to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the NBA. So it really covers all the 50 greatest players, other great moments, got some really great pictures in it. So that one's really, really good, really accessible.
I remember that. Yeah, that was a great moment for the NBA, 96.
It really was. Yeah, that's a great book. My sister actually bought that one for me for Christmas one year. But another book that's really obscure, but if you go through any basketball history book, you're almost going to always see this in the bibliography. As the authors, they put the list of books that they read in their research. It's called Cagers to Jump Shots. And it's not a very long book. It's maybe 150 pages. but it does a really, really great job of covering like those first 40 to 50 years.
So that's
of
like
the
the
game.
George Mikan days and stuff like that.
No, but, even before George Mikan. I think George Mikan, I don't even think he made it into the book. So this is talking like the 1920s with the original Celtics and the Philadelphia Spas and the invention of the game and when women started playing very early in the about the mid 1890s. So that was a good one. I enjoyed it. Then I noticed when I go through the bibliographies, it just keeps popping up in other people's books. So I know it's a really strong reference. And now, if I could go just one more, same author, it is David Halberstam. He wrote a book called The Breaks of the Game, which is, I think it won a Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah.
Breaks of the Game, very, very rare for a sports book to win the Pulitzer. But that was about the 1977 Portland Trail Blazers when they defeated the 76ers in the finals. And then he's got another one called Playing for Keeps, which goes into the early 80s. But, I mean, he covers the NBA with just, I mean, a level of skill and of writing that, I mean, a true journalist covering the game. So both those books are really well done.
Halberstam's a classic, and Breaks of the Game is a classic.
Oh, yeah.
Breaks of the Game is a top 5 sports book. I mean, that's up there with Ball 4.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah, he covered way more than just basketball. That was just, obviously, he just brought his journalistic skill to, as you're talking about, to a variety of different sports. And these are just, I think, two of the best that happen to cover basketball.
This is Basketball History 101 with Rick Loiza.
Welcome to Basketball History 101. I am your host, Rick Loiza. This is the podcast where we bring to life some of the forgotten stories from basketball history. Now, I love basketball. I love watching it. I love reading about it. I love learning about its history.
The podcast was kind of the product of a couple of different things. So when I was in high school, it was my goal to become the next Bob Costas. That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be in sports broadcasting. I wanted to be a host, just do everything that he did. I wanted to be the next Costas. So with that in mind, I got into college and I decided to go and be a DJ on the campus radio station. Because I wanted to get into that. I got hired, I think it was my junior year before I was able to get in. So back then, because it's a college station, nobody's getting paid, but you had to put in your dues to get on the air because a lot of people wanted to do it. So I spent a lot of my sophomore year literally just like picking up trash around the station, doing menial tasks in order to get my shot on the air. And so I really enjoyed being on the air. I thought that I've been told I have a fairly decent voice for radio or for audio. So combining that with my love for sports, I thought, I think this is something I can really do. And my son, who's my editor, he liked the idea of being able to edit the audio, put the music in, and he had some really great ideas for me. So it was just out of my love for basketball, what I think is some ability in terms of speaking on air, and then my son saying, hey, I can help with the editing part, and I can bring that skill to the team. So last summer, we went ahead and just got started. We wrote a couple of episodes, got the recording down. My son does the editing, and off we were. It just part of it was a downtime because of the COVID pandemic. So both of us had a little bit of extra time on our hands to get it started, and that's how we got it going.
The name of that podcast is Basketball History 101 at the Sports History Network. Tell us, please, about Basketball History 101. What's the mission of the podcast? What are you trying to do? What's the format?
Yeah, well, one of the things I wanted to do was to bring back some of these old stories that get forgotten about. You know, now that we're in the 21st century, I mean, you hear about, the debate of who's the GOAT. Is it Jordan or LeBron? Things like that. And you don't even almost hear about Wilt Chamberlain so much. And you don't hear about Jerry West so much. You don't hear about Bill Russell or Havlicek. And I thought, you know what? These are really great players that need to be brought back. They need to kind of be brought to the forefront of the conversation. And I thought that this would be a really great way to do it. And the reason I call it Basketball History 101 was the original concept with that it would be kind of like imagine that like I'm the professor and I've got a bunch of college freshmen and I'm doing a history course based on basketball. And so you're going to learn about the game, its impact, its development, how it's connected to the events going on in the day, and how the events of the day impacted the league and the development of the game. So that's where the name comes from, because I had toyed around with the idea of maybe going to the local community college and as some sort of an adjunct professor and offering just this one history course, which came out of an experience that I had in college, because I had a professor in college that did the history of rock and roll. And it was a really great class, and everybody thinks, oh, yeah, you just talk about the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and that's it. But the professor really put a lot of effort into really digging into not only the history of rock and roll, but what was the cultural context from which these different genres and different bands came from. And so that was kind of the genesis of, well, what if I do kind of the same thing but for basketball? So, yeah, that's where I come from. I just wanted to kind of bring back, for people that maybe aren't that familiar with the history, to bring back these old stories and just to remind people that basketball didn't start with Michael Jordan. It started way before him.
Well, it didn't even start with the NBA, ABA. You know,
No,
I mean,
not even.
That's the thing that blows your mind when you go back and look at this stuff through time. You go back to the 1880s, 1890s. There are, oh my God, major newspapers that don't have a sports page.
Yeah.
We take that for granted these days, you know, that sports is an integral part of the news. I mean, like on the happenings around town page, just stuff like that, stuff like barnstorming, which is so common in American sports before these leagues became organized. Many of them in 1920 for some reason, but in the case of baseball in the 19th century. And it's wild. It's wild. There's this whole other history of these sports if you go back far enough. We're going to go down a rabbit hole, because what else is a podcast good for? You describe yourself as an unabashed Lakers fan. I would also describe myself as the same, since, like you, the mid-'80s. Actually, I go back a slightly bit further than that. But you brought up Jerry West. Okay, I want to float this by you. I have a controversial opinion on the matter. They talk about this sometimes. I think Jerry West is the ultimate Laker.
It's hard to argue with that. I know a lot of people want to say it's Kobe, only because he's the all-time scorer in franchise history. I think he's also got a few other most games played as a Laker, things like that.
Oh, not even close. That was the thing, is I talked about him on another podcast for the Sports History Network, and look, the dude played something like 24% more minutes in a Laker uniform. And at the end of the day, that's the key stat if you're a fan of a team, right? So good case for Kobe, too.
Well, yeah, but to getting back into Jerry West, the reason I would still call Jerry West, Mr. Laker, if you're going to use that name, is because not only did he play for the Lakers his entire career, he never played for anybody else, but then he stayed on with the organization as a general manager, as a head coach very briefly. I mean, if you count all the championships that he had a hand in, both as a player, coach, or general manager, he had his hand in 8 or 9 of the championships. I think depending on when he left the Lakers, but he was involved in 8 or 9 championships for the team, and nobody else comes close.
Well, he got us Kobe. He wooed over Shaq.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Those are kind of well known, but in terms of here's a kind of a trade that he made in the 80s that a lot of people didn't like at the time. So in around 82 or 83, he trades away Norm Nixon, who was an all-star point guard, trades him away for the draft rights to Byron Scott. And looking back at it now, you say, of course, but the thing is with Norm Nixon and Magic, is you had 2 all-star point guards, and there just were not enough basketballs for both of them.
Sure.
They got to the point where the team could not play both at the same time. It was always one or the other, and obviously Magic was the better player. I mean, I guess if you're an all-star point guard, you probably feel pretty secure in your position, unless you're Norm Nixon and an even better point guard showed up in Magic Johnson. So Norm Nixon goes to the Clippers. Byron Scott, who was a great 2 guard, comes back to the Lakers, and they win 3 championships
Yeah.
with Byron Scott. So he made those kind of calls.
Scott was an essential part of the Lakers' success in the Showtime era. Right. So we'll take it easy on the Lakers glorying here. Sports History Network Showcase will return to talk with Rick Loiza, host of Basketball History 101, momentarily. Right, okay. Wanted to tell you about Greenland, a movie now available on digital Blu-ray and DVD. Gerard Butler, Morena Baccarin, and Scott Glenn star in the Rotten Tomatoes certified fresh, pulse-pounding disaster thriller Greenland. When a planet-killing comet races towards Earth, a father and his family make a perilous journey to their only hope for sanctuary, while encountering the best and worst in humanity as the countdown to global apocalypse approaches zero. Own Greenland today on digital Blu-ray and DVD, which includes deleted scenes, feature commentary with director Rick Romanois, and much more. Rick, have you seen this thing? Have you seen this Greenland?
I haven't yet, and I'm actually kind of a movie buff, but I haven't. I like Gerard Butler. I love him in. I realize it's an older movie, but I liked him in Timeline. I liked him. Yeah. That goes back.
Yeah.
But what's the one where he's protecting the president? Olympus Has Fallen, because there was another one. Yeah, because Aaron Eckhart had almost the same movie come out the same summer. So yeah, it was.
I looked at this thing, and the information here, the copy says that it's pulse pounding, which is one of those expressions they like to throw around. But Jesus, there's like a solid hour of this thing when you're on the edge of your seat. I couldn't put it down. I'm like, okay, I got about an hour to kill here. I'm going to watch this. And then, you get to that 20-minute mark where, traditionally that's when the plot turns. And then all of a sudden it just grabs you by the throat. You're strapped on for the ride like it's Mad Max Fury Road or something like this. It really keeps you interested for a good long stretch. It's gripping. So yeah, check it out. It's worth a look for sure. All right. Let's get back to the hoops. So 24, 25 games into the NBA season, depending on how hard your team's been struck by COVID, as we're recording this. Now, with the shortened schedule, this means that we're more than like a third of the way through. We're almost 40% through for some of these teams. What are some of your biggest surprises this year so far, Rick?
Well, my biggest surprise, just in terms of the actual standings, is the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, they're no threat to win the whole thing. I know that. But as usual, I just figured the Cavaliers were going to finish close to the bottom of the Eastern Conference. And when you look at them today, they're I think they're somewhere around 7 or 8, depending on which game they won last or how they played recently. So that was just kind of a surprise. But the other one that surprised me, kind of going the other direction, is the Denver Nuggets, who just came out of the Western Conference Finals. And right now, they're sitting in the 7th seed in the West. They had to win a couple of games in a row to help make that happen. But so I was expecting more from Denver. And I'm also, a big shocker for me was Golden State Warriors. I figured without Klay, with Draymond in and out of the lineup, they were not going to perform that well, but they're sitting in the 8th seed right now. And I told a friend of mine, I said, it just feels like it's Steph Curry and 4 random dudes, but they're doing quite well.
Yeah, not quite. They did well in the draft and such.
Yeah.
The thing about Denver is, for 2-3 years, the knock on them is, okay, who's your number 2 guy after Jokic? Because Jokic is playing at MVP level right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's fine. But the knock on them has always been, who's your number 2 guy? And then, Murray turned in this amazing playoffs last year, but guess what? He turned into a pumpkin again. It's just like he's not going to be the number 2 guy on a championship team. So Denver doesn't blow me away that much. If you had told me, oh yeah, Murray's going to regress, I wouldn't have been surprised at all at the beginning of the season. I think Miami is much more surprising. I mean, talk about dropping off a cliff.
Oh yeah.
Every single one of those players individually has bottomed out from last year. Because maybe last year was just a peak season for these guys, like the Buccaneers, I might say.
Kind of, because they brought back all the core players.
Right.
Are underperforming them. You kind of mentioned Dallas real quick, kind of same thing. I really thought Dallas was going to be in it in that top 4, top 5, and right now they're sitting at 13.
Porzingis is just trashed. He's just trashed. he's just not a number 2 guy on a championship team, right?
No, I agree with that.
A shell of his former self. I think what Porzingis probably needs to do at this point, and he's coming from Europe, and in Europe they're hardcore with the fundamentals. This is why you got Dirk Nowitzki. Okay, this is why you got a 7-footer who can shoot the 3, right? He can shoot the fadeaway. Is because in Europe everybody practices everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they master this, right? So what Porzingis I believe has to do is just switch his game up. He's got to learn how to play more like a wing, I guess. He's got to learn how to play get in your position kind of game. Set your post than he's used to. But then he has a game like he did against Golden State the other night when nobody's playing defense and he puts up 25, 27 points. So, all right, how about this one? How good are the big 3 Nets? And where do you think they how far do you think they go down the stretch, especially with a defense that isn't necessarily top 10?
You know what? I know this sounds cliche, but I'm going to go ahead and say it and said that, your offense wins games, your defense wins championships. And I almost cringe as it's coming out of my mouth. But once you get to the playoffs and you have to play the same team for up to 7 games in a row, it really changes. What worked for you in the regular season may not work for you in the playoffs. And I think if they run again, I could see them having a decent run in the playoffs, but once you get to that second round, third round, and you've got a really top-notch defensive team who's going to lock down on you and they're not able to, that's going to be where things come to bite them in the butt, because you've got to be able to play defense in the playoffs. You've got to be able to lock in on the other team's star and contain him. And I don't know that they've got that.
Well, they haven't Kevin Durant. I mean, the one thing I've never understood about Durant is why he has not been established as the number 2 best player in this league pretty much since about his 3rd year in the league. I mean, He has been. Forget Kawhi, forget Golden State Warriors, forget it. It's been him all the time. He's a 2-way player. He's the only guy that goes toe-to-toe with LeBron.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you were talking about the full game series. And this is kind of the knock on Harden, right? Is because if you face up against this guy 6 times in 9 days, you pretty much know his game. And his game is pretty limited. Dribble in space for a long time, fake a couple of times, and shoot. It's like you adapt. You can adapt to that, So we'll see. We'll see if they're different. I mean, Kyrie in a vacuum is a top 10 shooter in this league. We'll see how emotionally he stands up down the stretch. What about this one? Can the Sixers win the East?
Can the Sixers win the East? I don't know if they've got the maturity to go 7 games against Boston. I know Boston's a little bit lower, but when you got to lock in, I think Boston has what it takes. If they run into each other, right now they're the 1 and the 4, which means they play each other's second round. I think Boston takes them. I don't know that the 76 is not a talent issue. I just don't know that they've got kind of the mental fortitude to get over the hump in a 7-game series against Boston.
Okay, so if I cover the Celtics at plus 480 and they don't pay out, I'm coming back at you. I'm coming back at you. let's shift to the West. Similar question. Are the Jazz as good as they look right now? Last I looked, they were 19-5 and leading the West.
No.
Okay.
I mean, obviously they're playing great basketball. They got the best record in the league right now, and I'm not trying to take that away from them. But I think that when it comes down to one needing a bucket, now they do have Donovan Mitchell, and I think that's the guy
Yeah.
that anytime you get to the playoffs, you're going to have one or two games where it comes down to putting the ball in your superstar's hands, and he has to go get a bucket for you in clutch time. And so that's going to be Donovan Mitchell. Yeah, he'll probably get one of those games, but I don't see him getting the other one. I think they'll make some noise, but I don't see them getting beyond the Western Conference Finals. And that's only because they're going to have to, in order to do that, you'd have to either beat some combination of beating the Lakers, beating the Clippers, and who knows where Denver will be, come playoff time. We don't know. So that's just a lot to ask of Denver. They're still, I think they're still just finding their way.
And we're almost 40% of the way done this season. You can't be saying that for too much longer. What's up with the Clippers? Was it all the bubble?
I haven't had a chance to read Jared Dudley's new book about the time in the bubble. I plan to go and pick that up.
Yeah, definitely.
But
I'm looking forward to that.
Shout out to Jared Dudley, right?
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I was hearing was that Paul George was starting to experience some level of depression in the bubble, being away from his family or whatever for at that point it was over 2 months at the time they got knocked out. I heard that may have played a role. I know
they
the bubble was just
they
so
certainly
weird.
looked unhappy and just kind of limpid out there, basically. So yeah, I'm sure that had some effect. I guess this means that Paul George, this is the season when Paul George is clutch in the playoffs, right?
Well, it's a playoff P. If this is the year, if he wants to prove himself, this is the year to do it. And honestly, let's just wait and see. I'm not saying he is going to do it. I'm not saying he's not going to do it. Mm-hmm. But if he is going to do it, it's got to be this year.
Yeah, one would think he can finally live up to the Gatorade commercial. Okay. How about this one? Right now in the West, and again, we're far into this season, so we have to start talking about this kind of stuff. Here are the teams going for the 7 to 10 spots. Okay, there's some intriguing teams in here. All right, you've got the Kings. The Kings are at number 7. When was the last time that happened? They had Vlade Divac, I think. Kings, Nuggets, Warriors, Rockets, Grizzlies, Pelicans, Mavericks. That's 1, 2, 3. That's 7. Okay, you would have to eliminate 3 of those. Wow, could be tough. Who would you eliminate there?
Who do I eliminate? I think the Rockets, for me, they would be out. I'm sad to say that I think Dallas would be out just on what I've seen so far. And you're right, we're right around the 1/3 mark in the NBA schedule, and we really haven't seen anything from Dallas that would make me believe that they're going to turn it on or find whatever the thing is that they need to do. So I'm just not seeing it from Dallas. So Dallas, Houston, maybe. Who else would I take out?
Yeah, it's like at that point it comes down to the Grizzlies and the Pelicans, assuming that the Kings don't collapse completely.
Yeah, and I think the Pelicans are starting to find a groove. They've won 4 games in a row.
Yeah.
I think things are starting to mesh for them. So I like what they're doing. And Memphis, that's my kids' team too. My kids like Memphis, but yeah, they're all their stars I think are 22 or younger, and it's not their time yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Pelicans. I watched them last night. Oh boy. They're starting to look good. They're starting to look good over there. All right, last one on this. Bit of a loaded question, but are the Lakers still the favorites?
I don't say this just because I'm a Lakers fan. I'll say this on any given year, regardless of who's the champion. Assuming that the champion has brought back all their key players, then they're the favorite until somebody proves otherwise. I'm a big believer on doing it on the court. If you want to say that the Lakers aren't the favorites, well, then go beat them. And so until somebody knocks them off, I think they're there. I think they are. I think they lost a little bit when they lost both McGee and Dwight Howard in the off season, because they don't. Those both of those were such top-notch defenders. At least in my opinion. I mean, they can still for limited minutes they can bring it on defense. So that would be the one area where I think they got a little bit weaker. But I think everywhere else they're just as strong or stronger. So.
Oh yeah, well
I'm hoping they can do it.
They demonstrably improved on the off season, dude. I mean, Dennis Schroeder, dude.
Oh,
that was like the acquisition of the off season. It was basically the first one.
Yeah,
and that's a serious upgrade. And you got to remember too that it was fun seeing Dwight Howard become like a viable basketball player again. And JaVale McGee, I'll never say anything bad about a Team USA guy, but the truth is they were sitting out a whole playoff series. It's like you can run with Davis and LeBron as your biggest guys. You can do that. You're gonna face Golden State in a playoff series. You can do that. It'll be interesting to see what they do if they face the Nets in the finals or even the Sixers. Although the Sixers probably wouldn't be too difficult. I think we could score on them pretty easy. Laker fans. I was a little bit disappointed with losing Dudley because I think he was a plus on the defense, but screw it. We got Schroeder.
Yeah, he is way better than I thought he was. And I've seen him play plenty with the Thunder. I've seen him play before, but when you're watching him every single night, yeah, you get a different appreciation for what he brings.
In any case, all right. Well, Rick Louisa, Basketball History 101. When do you release new episodes of the show?
So our episodes release every Tuesday. So they come out, kind of like middle of the night on an early Tuesday morning. But that's our schedule. Once a week, you'll get a new episode. The episodes just cover a different story from basketball history. Sometimes it's just a player profile, covering a player from the past or a coach from the past. Sometimes it's a specific story that happened that has a basketball impact, sometimes a social impact. So, but yeah, every Tuesday.
You give us a sneak peek of your next episode?
Yeah, the next episode is, I got to just double check what I got the list, because I'm usually recording about 10 episodes ahead of time.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm
almost jealous.
So I've always got, or actually not recorded, but I have like 10 episodes researched and written about 10 weeks out. So the next episode that is coming out is the original Celtics. That's what it is. It's the original Celtics, which are a barnstorming team based out of New York City, and they just dominated the 1920s. And so we go back, we find out that story, how they developed, how they dominated, and they had 4 future Hall of Famers on that team. So they were, they were a juggernaut.
Nice. Rick Louisa, host of the Basketball History 101 podcast right here on the Sports History Network. Thanks for joining us on the showcase.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This has been the SHN Showcase podcast. We'd like to thank our special guest, Rick Louisa, host of the Basketball History 101 podcast, which can be found at sportshistorynetwork.com or wherever you get your podcast. The theme song for the SHN Showcase is Quartz by Tech, and it is available through a fair use agreement via freemusicarchive.org. SHN Showcase will be back soon with another Sports History Network podcast. Until then, this is Oz Davis saying stay safe and stay historical.
At the Sports History Network, we're all about sports yesteryear, and so we're so pleased to introduce you to Row One, an online memorabilia gallery and shop that brings your sports history to life anywhere. The Row One gallery includes over 5,200 gorgeously reproduced prints of team posters, game program covers, game tickets, advertisements, and more in baseball, pro and college football, pro and college basketball, and more. And any gallery item may be printed in a variety of sizes on wood, metal, canvas, acrylic, or poster paper. And in Row One shop, check out the thousands more of unique items with the retro and historical designs dating back to 1876, including t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, phone cases, mugs, blankets, pillows, towels, and even shower curtains. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com, ROW1, for access to the full Row One catalog and for gallery prints and gift items. Plus, get a 15% discount off all prints on the Row One Pictorium Gallery with coupon code SHN15. Follow the link on the show notes.